Hey everybody, it's Jay and Nick, and we are here today to talk to you about a Starlet, a particular Toyota Starlet, because we think this car and this team is a great example of why people work on cars and do creative stuff to cars. Really, it's about solving a puzzle.
And even in the context of fans of solving puzzles, there are some people that like the 10-piece jigsaw puzzle, and there are some people that like the 25,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. This team, Gunbarrel Cobras out of Colorado, is definitely the latter. This team started out in Lemons doing it the hard way. They had a Volvo wagon Lexus V8 with a triple carburetor setup made up of 3 completely different carburetors. Despite the challenge of that, they immediately started daydreaming about, what's our next build gonna be? So one of the team members, Dan, was reading a Grassroots Motorsports build thread about a Toyota Starlet, and he said, I've never even heard of a Toyota Starlet. Well, it's a little Toyota economy car, but it's rear-wheel drive, and so he just like, oh, this is like a unicorn, I gotta have it. Some people have that reaction to Ferrari GTOs, some people have them following the discovery of a Toyota Starlet.
And these are actually really rare cars now, but one popped up in Longmont, not terribly far from him. It was on a farm, it was covered in rat turds and birdseed. It was completely disgusting. He managed to talk the guy down to $400, including delivery. Car shows up a week later. So in this country, Starlets, most of them came with the 4K, which was carbureted, had like 50 horsepower. They had a 4-speed manual. Well, this one was the rare and exotic 4KE injected motor. But of course it didn't work because it was sitting around, it was plugged full of bird poop and stuff like that. They had to rip that off, throw it away. They finally found a European carburetor and intake manifold for this motor in Greece on eBay. They got that sent over, hooked that up, that kind of worked. Fuel system, totally destroyed, also full of bird poop. Had to rip that out, throw that away, put it in a fuel cell. Like that, the car actually kind of ran. It was slow, but it basically ran, and they showed up for Denver in 2019, and they really only had one problem, and that was it, and that was very simple. The valve lash on these motors tends to get loose when you rev them, and the push rods fall out. So they had to put them back in a few times.
So really quickly, this team had designs on engine swapping this car. 50 horsepower is okay. Actually, it's not. So they wanted something that had a little bit more punch. Now, the Starlet is super short, so they were pretty much limited to 4 cylinders, and maybe even in some cases those were too long, so maybe something like a V6. Their initial pick was the General Motors 60-degree V6, super common, reasonably good track record in Lemons, so they started going to junkyards looking for them. While they were at the junkyard, they had their tape measure and they started to notice a different engine that had good dimensions for the Starlet, was pretty unknown in racing circles. They took the oil pan out, realized it had some kind of special design that looked like it would be great for reliability, and it really is amazing that nobody in the competition world has come across this engine before, and I think by now you've probably figured out what I'm talking about.
The V6 Grand Vitara from Suzuki.
Yeah, Suzuki V6 from a Grand Vitara, of course. So they wound up with the 2.7 stroker out of an XL7. Who even knew these things? I guess most were 2.5s. That's what they wanted because it revs a little more or less torque, but who cares? This thing, it was totally clean. They dropped the pan, as Nick said. Everything looked fantastic, and best of all, it was 50% off day at Pick and Pull. They got 185 horsepower out of this thing. What's not to love?
Now, the transmission was a little tricky. In Lemons, most people want a manual. There is a manual for this engine, but it's 4-wheel drive. It's rare. They would have had to do a bell housing from Australia, flywheel from the moon, whatever. They finally decided, you know what? Let's just use the automatic. And the benefit of that was this particular automatic was the same one they were using in their Lexus swapped Volvo, and they had actually developed their own proprietary paddle shift system for this automatic, and they were pretty confident in the durability, so they're like, you know what, let's just use the automatic.
Yeah, beyond that, they say it was pretty simple. Obviously, they had to fabricate an oil pan out of sheet metal. So one car was a front sump, one car was back sump. Who cares? That's what welders and quarter-inch steel plate is for. Now, bear in mind, this motor, it already comes with fuel injection, distributorless ignition. I mean, this is a modern, reliable motor. Well, they said Well, that stuff's electronic. That won't be reliable at all. We're going to put on a carburetor and a distributor. Now, we all know here that was not for reliability. That was for the science experiment because it was going to be fun. They took something that worked, that was proven, that was not going to break their heart, and just for the sheer fun and experiment of it, decided to do something almost impossible.
So, in order to make a fuel-injected, coil-on-plug ignition engine into a carbureted distributor-driven engine, they took some scrap metal, they made an intake manifold, they put a carburetor on it. The distributor, they had to go to the auto parts store and find a random 6-cylinder distributor. I think they chose one from a Jeep. Hacked into the camshaft drive at the back of the engine and connected a shaft system to this Jeep distributor and made it all work somehow. It's got brackets and bearings and weird stuff from the hardware store, and according to them, it works great. The advance is a little weird. Something about it going the opposite direction of the way it should. They're considering upgrading to a General Motors HEI distributor and adding more bearings to reduce the wear on the shaft system.
Damn right.
They're also thinking about cobbling together their own EFI system, which is to say completely re-engineering what was already on the vehicle before they screwed it all up. They get a kick out of designing weird stuff and engineering solutions to questions that nobody asked, and when you do that, there's a really good chance the judges are going to put you into Class C, where you're competing against other weird-ass and terrible-ass cars, and so for them, that's way more enjoyable than trying to compete overall.